Hello, my dear friends, and welcome to another episode of Europa Rediviva. I have a lot to talk about today, so I hope I'm gonna be able to structure it well. I'm gonna continue on the topic of how Romania lost its sovereignty, because I think it's the most pressing topic, the most burning topic, especially because Romania is not even aware of the fact that it lost its sovereignty. Most Romanians don't even know when they were sovereign and what sovereignty consists in, and because these things are not in the public discourse. So I tried to sketch a bit of a timeline. Romanians came to political history quite late. They became nominally sovereign in 1881, the Kingdom of Romania, the first sovereign Romanian state. And this state was still beholden to foreign interests to a large extent. The capital was foreign. The ruling dynasty was foreign. The political class was to a large extent comprised of foreign agents, people who had been students in France or Germany, who had been recruited there. The first generation of Romanian students abroad were recruited by the French, and they were also inducted into the Freemasonry, and they set up the beginnings of the Romanian state. Then it was the Germans. And after the sad fate that Romania had after the Second World War of being on the losing side for once, after a long streak of only being on the winning side at the end of a war, Romania was occupied by Soviet troops, but it managed to convince them to withdraw in 1958. So that's like more than 3 decades earlier than they withdrew from the rest of Eastern Europe. And Romania embarked upon this national path ever since 1958. And the era of Ceausescu was for sure the one of maximum national sovereignty. Of course, in order to assess such a claim, you have to understand what national sovereignty means and what are its elements. And I'm not going to be academic about it, but if you can project your own culture domestically, if you can have your own foreign policy completely independent and have relations according to your own interest with whoever you want, if you can build up a national economy that's domestically owned, if you invest the proceeds of that economy into the welfare of your people, in education, in healthcare, and so on. This is what was done in those eras and in those decades, and the results show. I mean, there is no field of let's say civilization where Romania did not excel in that era. So even in sports, it had the best results then, but also in science, in engineering, in all sorts of fields, in healthcare. It innovated and it produced top-level experts in those decades. Because those decades were, as I said, decades of national investment, investment in its own population. The living conditions improved tremendously. The housing stock grew by a lot. There were these loans taken out to build a national economy, and those loans were repaid from the proceeds of that national economy. So therefore, that national economy was profitable, despite what the network of foreign agents said after 1990. And this regime of national sovereignty did not manage to perpetuate itself, did not manage to reproduce. This was a fault, and this is something that also tells me that Romanians cannot achieve something bigger than that. So that was the apex of Romanian sovereignty, and I don't think Romania, with the mentality of the Romanian people, can achieve something more. Because in order to be a radically independent people, you have to trust yourself. You have to have great self-esteem. You have to not be traitors. So, for example, the regime fell. Okay, the regime fell also because of its own contradictions. It did not manage to reproduce itself. It did not have a theoretical model that was sustainable. It tried to model itself on the North Korean kind of monarchic communism, dynastic communism, and it failed because it did not have the proper support. In the case of North Korea, Kim Il Sung Kim Il Sung was actually the national hero and the founder of the country, in the fact that he successfully fought the imperialists, successfully fought the Americans. Whereas Ceausescu was kind of the second generation of communists, and he did not have such a prominent role in the regime before, in the fight against, let's say, fascism. So he did not have these credentials of being such a legendary figure. Dej had this to a large extent because he had been a union leader. He had organized the strike in Grivița Steelworks, and he went to jail for union activity for 11 years. So he did have something to his name, some credentials. With Ceausescu, it was slimmer, and his cult of personality, modeled on the Korean one, did not have such credibility. In the Korean one, especially after what the Americans did to Pyongyang, how they leveled the city and how they leveled most North Korean cities and how they massacred a big chunk of the North Korean population. There was something very heroic to the struggle against them. But in Romania's case, the Korean model that was adopted was not exactly suitable. I don't know if any other model would have been suitable because, as I said, the Romanian elites, including the Romanian communist elites, were so drawn to the West, and they were so drawn to becoming foreign agents, that it was an irrepressible instinct. And no amount of patriotic propaganda would have convinced them not to defect. So Romania has had some high-level defections. General Pacepa, I think in 1981 or sometime around that, or 1980, he defected to the United States, so he was the head of the Securitate. And subsequently, the Romanian intelligence service was no longer trusted by Ceausescu, and he trusted him. He entrusted himself to other people who advised him without having the proper apparatus, the proper intelligence apparatus that the Securitate had. The army was full of foreign agents. Now in Romania it is politically acceptable. It has become politically acceptable to say that the people who seized power in 1989, the putsch organizers, were Soviet agents. Sure, yeah, but some of them were not Soviet agents, some of them were Western agents, and that is still not fashionable to say. So that the intelligentsia that appeared on television those days had been recruited by the CIA and the MI6, or that General Stănculescu, who actually enacted the coup d'etat, he became the head of the army and subsequently ordered the arrest and the execution of the Ceausescu couple, and allowed the KGB putschists to come to power. He was an MI6 agent. He had been recruited by the British in the framework of that airplane engines procurement plan with Rolls-Royce. Ceausescu had done this state visit in Great Britain, and he had agreed to purchase some Rolls-Royce airplane engines and some technical contractors that were sent from the UK to Romania to do this deal with the army and to set up the details were of Romanian descent, like this guy who recruited General Stănculescu. And General Stănculescu subsequently acted on behalf of the British. So he became Minister for National Economy in the so-called revolutionary government. And while he was Minister of Defense, he secured this contract, this endowment contract for the Romanian army with Motorola, an American company, for which he was also prosecuted. But then he served the British full time as a Minister of National Economy. He lobbied for the privatization of Romanian metallurgical industry to British interests, and after his dismissal from the government, he was a consultant for a British investment fund. And he talks about it openly in his books, how he was recruited by the MI6. But this is not in the Romanian public discourse. The so-called Romanian intellectual class that is now running everything that is a cultural institution, their books are the only ones that can be found in bookstores. They have this prestige network in academia and so on. This network was built by George Soros at the behest of Silviu Brucan. Silviu Brucan was this triple agent, Soviet, American, Israeli, and he also brought Ronald Lauder to Romania to set up the first glamorous private TV station, Ronald Lauder being the head of the World Jewish Congress. So the Romanian intelligentsia after 1990 was molded by these British and especially American interests in the framework of the Soros Open Society Foundation and so on. And this is why they completely demonized sovereignty. They completely demonized the Ceausescu regime because it was a regime of national sovereignty and their patrons had defected to foreign intelligence services. They had been recruited to by the British, by the French, by the Americans. And in the army, there was this huge chunk at the top of generals who had studied in the Soviet Union, and they maintained contacts with the GRU. And many of the operations that took part during the revolution were orchestrated by these people. In the end, the revolution was bloody, purposeless, because the Securitate, so the domestic intelligence services, who were the guarantors of the regime and who were supposed to defend national sovereignty, did not fight. So actually the groups of foreign agents orchestrated this whole scenario that is done at every colored revolution. So, for example, Maidan in Kiev 2014. There were NATO-trained Georgian snipers who fired at both the protesters and the police so as to instigate revolt. In Iran this year, there were Mossad agents who fired at both the police and the protesters to instigate revolt, and so on. So this is how you orchestrate a revolution. And these people, I'm not sure if they were more like GRU or more like MI6, but this is a trademark of the Western intelligence services, the so-called terrorists. They were there to strike up revolt and to accelerate the path to civil war, but they had no opponents because the Securitate, which was the institution defending the national sovereignty, put itself under the command of the army, of the GRU operated army from the beginning, and they had some of their workers killed, but without resisting, so they were just assassinated. And the Securitate offered no resistance. The head of the Securitate, Iulian Vlad, said in subsequent interviews that they knew for about 2 years that this was coming, and they assessed their chances, and they realized that they didn't have much chance to stop it. First of all, because it was going to be a pan-European thing, so it was going to be a regime change all across Eastern Europe, and because Ceausescu did not listen to them. So Ceausescu did not trust the Securitate anymore, and they had nobody to serve, essentially. The army was the powerful institution, and the army was co-opted at the top by these foreign agents, especially by the Soviet military intelligence services, but also by MI6, and MI6 had the determinant role in what happened in the revolution with the alleged suicide of General Vasile Milea, who was the head of the Romanian army, and the ascent of Stănculescu, who was the MI6 agent, to the top of the Romanian army. And Stănculescu told the military that was guarding the Central Committee of the Romanian Communist Party to withdraw. So he gave that order without receiving it from Ceausescu. He told Ceausescu to go on the helicopter, and he subsequently told the military to fraternize with the revolutionaries, and to to subsequently arrest Ceausescu and to kill him. And Romanian history from 1989 onwards flowed from this start in which the country had been confiscated by foreign agents. Of course, then there was a split between the foreign agents. So already in 1990, the Western foreign agents had the plans to dismember Romania. There was the provocation in Târgu Mureș in March 1990. The idea was to Yugoslavize Romania, to turn it into smaller states so as it could be easily colonized. And that did not go through because the Soviets did not go along with it, just like they did not go along with the breakup of Yugoslavia. And the Soviet agents were the strongest force at the top of the Romanian state. And this is why all of these provocations were staged against them. The Soviets in 1990 won the elections. They won a landslide election with Iliescu. And his opponents, Radu Câmpeanu was a French agent, Ion Rațiu was a British agent. His opponents scored very weak scores. But there were these color revolution attempts again. So the so-called University Square protest, which was also instigated by this network of intellectuals recruited by the Western intelligence services, which was an attempt to topple the elected, pro-Soviet, let's say, government and to turn it into a pro-British or pro-Western anyway, led government run by this network of foreign agents. Victor Atanasie Stănculescu had also been offered by the MI6 to run for president in 1992, and he would have received support, but he declined. The intellectuals, they followed their path all the way up until today, when the whole recent history of Romania is completely falsified, and if you say anything that goes against the false narrative, they are completely outraged, and when they hear about national sovereignty, they're completely outraged, and they want Romania to be as beholden as possible to the foreign interests and to the foreign influences, and they have complete disdain for everything that's domestic and that's domestically oriented. Then the intellectual class only went in one direction. So they started the civic alliance, civic party, anyway, and finally they seized power in 1996. It was a similar model all around Eastern Europe, including in Russia. The main difference is that in Russia, the people woke up quite strongly after 2000, and they never went back. Whereas in Romania, it was impossible to reconstitute sovereignty and keep it, because the sovereignist forces became eroded through the passage of time. The KGB elements, the pro-Soviet elements that were dominant in 1990, had to align themselves with the sovereigntist forces after 1991, after the Soviet Union fell, because they had no more patrons, and they had great disdain for the West, for the kleptocratic elites of the West as well. So between 1992 and 1996, Romania was governed by this alliance of nationalist parties that came from the Securitate and from the Ceausescu regime, together with the pro-Soviet revolutionaries, who lost their patronage. But this government of 1992-1996 did not manage to reproduce itself. So in 1996, the network of Western agents, because now they were the only foreign agents, the network of Western agents seized power completely. And even though they lost it by a huge amount in 2000, so the people were very upset with their rule, at the behest of their foreign masters. So the complete liquidation of the Romanian economy. The Romanian economy was privatized for scraps or just liquidated so as to not be a source of competition for Western corporations. And Romania aligned itself, even though it was not a NATO member, aligned itself strongly with NATO while it was bombing Yugoslavia, which was also seen very bad by most Romanians. So there was this backlash, just like in Russia, they went on the national path after 2000. In Romania, they also wanted to go on the national path, but it was no longer possible. The Snagov Consensus of 1995 had been signed, in which all the parties, including the nationalist ones, the sovereigntist ones, wanted to go for NATO and EU accession. And from that point onwards, the path was determined. So even though in 2000, the, let's say, pro-sovereigntist forces or the anti-Western agents parties won a 2/3 majority, the Social Democrats were forced to become this European vassal, this European type social democratic party, which they were not until that moment, in order to secure NATO and EU accession. And the nationalists finally dismembered the Romanian Nationalist Party, the Great Romania Party, did not manage to get into parliament in the next elections, I think, in 2004 or maybe in 2008. But it was no longer credible, and the discourse of national interest was no longer credible among the public, even though a majority of them said that they regretted communism, that they regretted Ceausescu, and that was the regime that they respected the most. But it was no longer possible to go back. And the intelligence services were also purged, so any national-oriented officer had to leave their ranks because they were now supposed to receive orders from NATO. There was a chain of command, so the national interest was no longer tolerated, even in the military structures. And then the politicians that were not foreign agents, they were just foreign collaborators, started to be purged through this anti-corruption drive that Băsescu instigated at the behest of the Americans, so to turn criminal justice into a political weapon and to basically wipe the whole political class clean of every national element. And well, this is how Romania ended up in its sorry state of today, where you only have comprador elites. They struggle among themselves, but they do not serve the public interest at all. And of course, Romanians try to have a protest vote against that. But there is a cordon sanitaire, the pro-Romanian forces are not allowed into power, and, well, Romania has a history, every country has a history of state dilution at some point in its past. In the history of Romania, this resembles a bit the period of the 1930s, when the communists were outlawed and the legionnaires, the far right, was not allowed to take power through elections, even though it stood a good chance of winning the elections. So the government that was geopolitically aligned in another direction had to always secure support in some way until it became impossible for them to have any kind of electoral majority. And a coup d'etat was instigated by the king, and subsequently Romania became a one-party state with a ruler that had a personality cult, just like in any dictatorship. It was probably modeled after Mussolini, so the dictatorship of Carol II after 1938. Romania is now also on this path where it denies reality, it denies the fact that it is run at the behest of foreign interests, and it is milked just like a colony. But this type of discourse is not allowed, it is not permitted, so that the majority of the population doesn't understand the magnitude of the problem and the root cause of it. They are being misled by all sorts of accusations of corruption and whatever. But the reality of the story is that Romania is run by this network of foreign agents who just seized its patrimony, its resources, even its human resources after 1990, and have replaced the regime of national development and of ensuring a welfare regime for its citizens. They've replaced it to an extractive regime of neo-colonial foreign interests that just use Romania's resources, be them natural or human or economic resources, for these foreign interests. And this is why there is this big protest vote. Unfortunately, the solution that the system allowed is not a very dangerous one. So the people who are in this sovereigntist opposition right now are not exactly very competent people. They're not the kind of people that understand what a welfare regime is and what a regime of national development is. They just play the card of the United States and Israel geopolitically against the card of France and Germany. This is kind of like their understanding. So there is still no domestic political force that has national interest at heart and that wants Romania to be really sovereign. It's this political spectrum where you have the comprador elites of the European intelligence services versus the comprador elite of the American intelligence services, which have now fused with Mossad, so it's hard to tell the difference. And this is why I was saying that in Romania it is impossible to even conceptualize the idea of sovereignty, because it leads all the way back to Ceausescu's regime, and it is illegal. So things have become so bad that, as I said in the previous episode, not only are foreign agents not prosecuted, and people who betrayed to the West are not barred from public office, but the other thing is true. The collaborators of domestic intelligence services until 1989 are barred from public office. So you have a reversal, a complete state capture by the foreign agents, in which they do not allow the domestic agents into power. But not only this, you also have the issue with Ceausescu. He was killed after, well, you can't really call it a show trial or a kangaroo court. This is what Saddam Hussein had. It was a play. It was kind of a 30-minute act. It wasn't even a theater play, because that would have been longer. It was just a 30-minute cosplay inside the military barracks, and they were subsequently shot. So it was not a trial. But the Romanian state, the state of the foreign agents, still recognizes it as a trial, recognizes the verdict as being legitimate, and has even passed legislation to criminalize any kind of doubt issued upon that verdict. So Ceausescu was allegedly convicted to death for genocide, for genociding the Romanian people, even though the Romanian population grew by many millions under his rule, and of subverting the national economy, but the national economy disappeared after his rule, and so on. So the accusations were not just fake, they were reverted. He had done exactly the opposite of what he was accused of. But now there is legislation in Romania that prohibits any kind of glorification or even excuse of people who have been convicted for genocide, Ceausescu being one of them. So if you say Ceausescu did not commit genocide on the territory of Romania, you can be criminally prosecuted, which is the case of some sovereigntists who have said good things about Ceausescu. And there's this state institution. There are two very powerful state institutions that are essential for the maintenance of this discourse of the foreign agents. One is the Elie Wiesel Institute, and the other one is the Institute for the Study of the Crimes of Communism. And the latter is kind of this guard dog against sovereigntism. Actually, both of them are guard dogs against sovereigntism. Elie Wiesel Institute is a guard dog against the type of sovereigntism that Romania tried to embark upon in the interwar period. And the other one, is the guard dog against the sovereigntism that Romania had under Ceausescu. So to fight any kind of national communist tendencies and any kind of rehabilitation of that regime. And this goes as far as to prosecute people who say that Ceausescu did not commit genocide, so who point out the obvious. And this thing with the fact that the people orchestrating the revolution, be it the intellectuals that appeared on television those days, or be it the army heads, or the politicians that made up the National Salvation Front, the fact that they were all foreign agents and that they had all betrayed Romania to foreign intelligence services, this is not discussed, and even if it is mentioned, it is seen as something worthwhile doing. So even in the case of Pacepa, the fact that he betrayed Romania to the United States is seen in public discourse as an act of patriotism, as an act of defending the true interests of Romania. So this is why I said in the previous episode, Romania is this country that is turned completely upside down. It has huge disdain because it is run by this network of foreign agents, both culturally, economically, politically, militarily, in any walk of life. Romania is run by this network of foreign agents. And this is why, for most Romanians, it is not even possible to question the nature of the regime and to realize that Romania is lacking sovereignty and it is just like a colony without knowing that it is a colony. So it is as if the Indians thought that they had to serve the British out of their own volition because the British were somehow superior, and any kind of Indian interest was to be shunned. This is kind of the mentality in Romania now. You say Romanian interest, they look at you like as if you say you eat dead dogs. This is how the discourse was engineered. And I think it's going to end badly, because any regime, any system that does not allow self-correction mechanisms to take place will be in for a rude awakening at some point in the future, and there will be a crash. Right now, Romania is after having annulled the presidential elections because the sovereigntists would have won. Now it is trying to use this cordon sanitaire against the allegedly sovereigntist opposition, and it is trying to squeeze in a coalition of parties that are not compatible with each other, even though they all behest to the same foreign interests. But ideologically, they're not aligned very well, and there are many conflicts. And it's like in Germany. In Germany, there's this cordon sanitaire against the Alternative für Deutschland. The German political establishment is trying to portray it as the National Socialists and to keep it out of power, and probably eventually it will have to ban it. Something similar is happening in Romania. The sovereigntist opposition is being delegitimized as being pro-Russian, which it is not. So if there were a multipolar opposition wanting to align Romania with BRICS, I would have noticed, but it's not the case. They want to align Romania with America and Israel. But still, they are painted as being the geopolitical enemy and as being pro-Russian, and they're not allowed into power. And this will lead to them at some point winning more than 50% of the vote, or to be banned. So either way, the alleged pro-Europeans will lose power, but it will be through a crash of some kind. Right now, Romania is in the impossibility of having a government because of the contradictions of running it democratically. So the contradiction between running the country democratically through the will of the people, and the people have voted for prosperity, not for austerity, and the dictates of the foreign masters who want Romania to continue supporting Ukraine and to continue doing these massive budgetary allocations, which are a state secret, to Ukraine, and to increase the austerity. So to milk the population even more. So of course there is this tension between the network of foreign agents and the fact that they function democratically, more or less. They still have to go to the electorate every 4 years, and the electorate will buy the corruption story up to a point, It's not like corruption grew 10 times in Romania in the last 6 years when this economic catastrophe started being engineered. It's not because of corruption. It's the other way around. The anti-corruption struggle managed to clean the Romanian political system of any domestic agents, and it is now only the foreign agents that run the country, and they run it exclusively to the benefit of their foreign paymasters. And this is why they milk the population dry, and this is why there's so much austerity. And the only thing that the foreign network can promise the electorate is more austerity. There is no way out of austerity. There has to be more austerity and more austerity until the Odessa Triangle wins, because Romania is now part of this structure together with Moldova and Ukraine, and it is the support of this structure, and it has to be used until the final consequences, until the system will break somehow. This is why I'm not optimistic in these developments. And if the Constitutional Court and the Central Electorate Bureau banned sovereigntist candidates from the presidential elections because of their geopolitical outlook, I'm pretty sure the same will happen subsequently in the parliamentary elections, and sovereigntist parties will be banned because they will be deemed a threat to public order or something like this. And the regime will have to maintain itself, probably through dictatorship at some point. So at some point, they will probably have to say, okay, we tried with the elections, we tried with this facade of democracy, but apparently it doesn't work. So in order to maintain the pro-Western or the pro-European direction, we have to declare a state of emergency, we have to put in this strong hand regime, because otherwise the disinformers will win. Otherwise it's too hard to fight the disinformation speech, to fight the reality that people believe instead of believing our propaganda. So yeah, I'm afraid things look bleak, but I wanted to kind of give you a history and a timeline of how these things happened and how the network of foreign agents evolved throughout these 37 years of foreign rule and of counter-revolutionary times. Because, well, I mean, if you call state capture a revolution, state capture by foreign agents a revolution, then then things do not mean anything. Concepts do not have meaning anymore. If you denote a thing by its opposite. So a revolution is something that is for the people, by the people, and that takes power from some elites, maybe some foreign elites, and gives the power to the masses. But in 1989, the opposite happened. The power was taken away from the masses, who, okay, it's understandable why they did not consider to have it, but they did have it. So Romania was running their interests, despite the austerity measures. And they were tricked into not owning anything. 37 years later, they were tricked by this network of foreign agents to not own anything and to be debt mules, to be milked of debt. Now, because there's nothing more to privatize and there's nothing more to exploit from the present, the Romanians are exploited in the future through this debt accumulation, which will result in decades of austerity. And it will be a different kind of austerity than the one in the 1980s, because between 1981 and 1989, Romania embarked upon this accelerated drive to pay its foreign debt, to pay it in an accelerated fashion. What was supposed to be paid in 25 years was paid in only 8, and that was the capital cost of the Romanian economy. So from that point onwards, Romania had no more debt and it had a national economy. Now Romania has no more national economy, and its debt will continue to pile up for all sorts of stupid reasons, be it vaccines, be it weapons to fight Russia and so on, that are instigated by the network of foreign agents and their mouthpieces in the media and in the so-called intellectual class. So yeah, I don't know when the Romanians will wake up from this scam, because Romanians are very astute with respect to scamming, but yeah, I'm curious when they will wake up from the fact that they are being used in such a way. This is what I wanted to tell you. I've rambled for quite some time. I wanted to make it as brief as possible, but it's still very long. I hope you enjoyed it. If you like what I do, like, share, subscribe, and if you want to support me financially, you'll find the link in the description of the channel how to do so. And until next time, take care.